You didn't dance today. I'm surprised.
I did. Tad bit.
Oh, okay, a tad bit. Okay, all right. Hi, everyone. Hi, Ashok. How are you this week?
I am well, thank you, Sham. How you been? I like your Cheongsam top.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I usually bring it out during Chinese New Year, but since it was Hungry Ghost, I said, okay, maybe it might be relevant. I don't know. I just thought I just felt like my Cheongsam today.
Okay, that's
Anyway,
important.
and it's the starting of a new month. It's August. And
September, you mean?
Sorry, September. Oh my goodness, horrible. September, because we're talking about August and the festival, and I got
That's
it
right.
hooked up on my head. Yeah. Okay. So it's September. Yes. Fast forward, Sham. Don't live in the past. And we've got a theme. Evolving leadership. Right. And we were talking about what that means. It means, it could mean from the growth perspective, but also, it may not mean big growth jumps. It could also be, small little twists, and because we are seeing things that are happening. So it could be at the personal level, can also be at the macro level, as you were saying. Sure.
That's right.
And we have, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is Leadership in Flow Asia, everyone. And we've been on live every week since February 2022, every Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. Malaysia, Singapore time. And our goal or our objective or our vision is to speak to quiet leaders, the introspective leaders around Asia, to unpack, to mine their nuggets around what helps them in terms of personal growth, their leadership growth, and together combine how does that evolve then to business results that they see for themselves, for their team, and the organization that they represent. And so, we have our guest for today who's going to
Yes,
kick
we
off
do.
the month of September. And I'm going to hand over to Ashu to introduce our guest while I say hello to our viewers.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. All right, so who do we have for the month of September? Kicking off the month of September is none other than Purnima Singh. Now, she is very experienced, right? She's been a consultant before, but she's been spending a lot of time in the HR space. Currently, she is a CHRO for RightShip. And prior to that, she's been with Cargill, and before that, even with BHP. She's got extensive experience. I just love her exciting energy and how she, as a person and as a leader, has consistently evolved, right? And I'm very excited to learn from her. And also, she's got a lot of stories to tell about her global travels, and how she learned and evolved from there too. So let's bring her on.
Okay, let me do that. And let's put you up. Hi, Purnima.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Sharmini. And hi, Ashok.
Hello, how are you?
Very well.
Suddenly I got to be so very English.
You've set the bar very high with that introduction, so the pressure is on. Huh?
But we know
there's no pressure. You
no pressure.
will evolve.
I was listing out all the things I now need to be, and now it's enthusiastic, exciting energy, introspective. So I'm going to try and emulate all of that.
That's all. That's all. Okay, tell you what, let me kick off and let's talk about you. right? So the audience also can understand who you are. And for all our guests who have logged in, thank you very much for following us. All right. Okay, so Purnima, I know in the pre-show that we had, we talked about you and we talked about why you always pushed yourself, or you shared with us about expanding your comfort zone, right? And you also talked about as a young child, you had to do that, right? So do share with us, right? Because my question to you is this: why is expanding your comfort zone important for you?
Okay, I will give it a shot. So I think, expanding my comfort zone is not really just important for me. I think it's important for everyone. And the reason that I think so is it's almost coded in our DNA if you think about it. When we grow up, when we're born as children, everything is outside of our comfort zone as babies. You've never walked, you've never eaten
Okay.
solid foods, you've never done anything. Even to nerd out a bit and get a bit sciencey, I mean, the theory of evolution in Darwin is about adapting to change and pushing out
Mhm.
of the norms and that comfort zone. And it really, I think it comes down to a question of you either adapt and you survive or you don't. It's really that. It's a question of survival because you may choose to stagnate, but the world around you will not. So
Okay.
you either move or you get left behind. But I know that's a bleak view. I think on the other hand, there's a lot to be gained as well out of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. There's new experiences to be had. There's a self
Mhm.
actualization to be attained. But it's really when I think back and you talked a bit, Ashok, about my growing and formative years. My father was in the airlines, so we
Mhm.
moved around a lot. Every few years, we were posted, from one country to another. And it wasn't, just a sort of one city to the next, but it was countries like, elementary school, play school in Thailand, elementary school in Amsterdam, high school in Japan, India for my undergrad, UK for my master's, my working life in Singapore, and everything else. So it was some pretty drastic moves. And I'm obviously giving away my age here, but this was pre-era of Facebook and WhatsApp and all these other great things that I see my kids have now, that they can still remain connected with these friends and still maintain these friendships. So for me, and I'm a self-professed introvert, but a learned extrovert, this was massively out of my comfort zone. It meant going to a new school every few years and finding these cliquish, often group of girls or boys or whoever, and introducing myself and asking them if I could join them, or sit at a table at a cafeteria for lunch with
Mhm.
them. And this was extremely awkward and extremely uncomfortable. But I had to do it, knowing again and again that I'm going to be doing this again a few years from now. And these are friendships that I'm going to make, and a lot of them I'm going to lose. But it forced me out of my comfort zone so many times that I think that became my comfort zone, being uncomfortable.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. A couple of things struck out to me when you were mentioning about this. You said, yes, there are many experiences, but one of the things that struck out to me is self-actualization,
Hmm.
right? And you mentioned you are an introvert, but a learned extrovert, right?
Right.
Self-professed introvert, but a learned extrovert, and that tells me about the introspection anyway, right? Uh, so I've got two questions from here. Is one of it is, what do you mean by a learned extrovert, and what are the actions you took to get out of that? Because that is also a comfort zone, right? That you needed to get into, right? So maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about that before I go to another question.
Sure. Look, I think the way I describe introversion and extroversion is not necessarily how loud you are or how comfortable you are being the center of the party. It's really more a question of where you give and get your energy from. If as an introvert, I am in a situation where I do have to be extremely social. I'm interacting with a lot of people. I'm talking. I need to regain that energy with some downtime, with some alone time, with some introspection, reflection just on my own. Whereas I think for extroverts, being social like that is where they are getting energy. They leave those gatherings more energized. they leave them more excited to do more. So I think first of all, it's important that's sort of the definition. So when I say learned extrovert, I still need my downtime. I'm still at heart an introvert that needs to spend that time to replenish that energy that I've given in those interactions. But I've learned to be able to be comfortable in those interactions. I've learned to be able to make those conversations and ask people about themselves, and often put myself in situations that I will ask embarrassing questions in, because it's so obvious I have no idea what I'm talking about here. But a genuine, authentic curiosity to do these situations and to these people that I'm around. That's the learned part of the extroversion for me.
Right. Okay. And so that links me up to self-actualization, right? Why is that so important for you?
I think it's being self-actualization again is being who you can be in its fullest potential. So very often we sort of we make these boundaries for who we think we are. I am this, I am that, and there's so much more to be pushed and so much more to be explored for who we are and who we can be. So I think self-actualization is really a journey of discovering myself and surprising myself with what more I can do, and confirming in other areas where I should definitely not explore further because it's not a skill set I possess. But it's part of the whole journey, I think, of life is trying to get to that best version of myself.
Wow. Because what you just
Nice.
described, it's not an easy process, because you said we do set boundaries, and I guess in some areas they talk about this is the identity that you create for yourself, right? And then
Yep.
therefore you're stuck in a certain boundary. Who I am, who can I be, right? But constantly looking at that and saying this is not who I am.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of courage, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think it takes courage, it takes bravery, it takes the ability to not be embarrassed or too harsh on yourself when things don't go to plan. And again, I do want to qualify that, though. Pushing out of your comfort zone is always great in terms of growth, but it's not always something that it is something that needs to be evaluated, whether or not there is a boundary that needs to be challenged. So, I mean, for example,
Wow.
running someone over with my car is definitely well out of my comfort zone. It's not something that I want to grow into and evolve, and not a boundary I will look to push. So similarly, there are certain definitions to myself that are very core to me, my values,
Yes.
how I see myself as a person, as a parent, as a friend, as a daughter, and those are well within my comfort zone, but they're there for a reason. I don't want to push those boundaries. It's these other areas where I find that I am limiting myself by saying I can't do this, I can't be this, but I wish I could. It's when you wish you could that you should challenge that boundary.
Wow. I love that. No, thank you very much, Purnima. Because what I'm hearing is this: you said yes, comfort zone can help me grow,
Yes.
but I also need to evaluate about
Correct.
that growth, right?
Exactly.
And one of your anchors is values, right? So you anchor back to your values to ask yourself, all right, is this growth going to make me a better person? Which then boils down to choices that you're making, isn't it?
Exactly.
So then my question is this: how do you mitigate risks when making choices? Because a
I
risk could be, you know how it is. There can be some values that I know you will never compromise, but sometimes there can be a certain gray line there. I don't know. Yeah, but how do you mitigate risks?
I would be frightfully rich playing the stock market if I had the answer to that question, Ashok. If I could tell you exactly what the formula was. It's I don't think that there is ever truly a complete mitigation of risk.
Okay.
To me, it's more an awareness and an acceptance of risk. You to be aware and try and get the information that you can before you're making a decision. Evaluate how much is, and you know that paradigm, right? The known, unknown, known,
Mhm.
those four boxes. So it's to try and be aware that there will always be something up in that box of the unknown. I don't know what I don't know. and how much of that risk is acceptable risk, and then you move on and make a decision. It's interesting. I was watching a TED talk the other day on my commute to work, and don't worry, I don't drive. And they spoke about this very interesting concept called the TMI curve. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Okay, so the TMI curve is the too much information curve,
Oh,
and it's basically represented graphically by an inverted bell curve. And if you can visualize that, right, there's information on one axis, on the x-axis, and confusion on the y-axis. So what it tells you is that when you have too little information, you are going to be highly confused. Then there comes a point where you have just the right amount of information for you to feel comfortable making a decision. And then you start tipping into the point of, I have so much information, I'm confused again. So I think it's important to know where that tipping point is when you're making a decision, because it's very easy to be paralyzed with too much coming in. When you know too much, and you've sort of paralyzed yourself to a point of, I don't know what the best outcome is, because perfection rarely exists.
no, fair
So
enough.
not chasing
Yeah.
the perfect.
No, fair enough. So yes, there's always that known and unknowns, the things that they
Yep.
don't know. And I know one of the things that you do is you have your own board of directors.
Yes.
And I believe that is one of the ways that you mitigate the risk.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Can you
We-
share with all our fellows who have logged in, right? Share with us about your
yes.
thinking behind your board of directors and how they have helped you.
Yes, absolutely. We spoke about this at the pre-show. So my personal board of directors, and this is something I think everybody can get some value out of, is to form their own board of directors. I have a few people in my life that I lean on. I lean on because I value their opinion. I value their honesty. I value the experiences that they've had and what I can learn from them. And it's a very diverse group. It ranges from some family members to some bosses I've had to some close friends or acquaintances. And it's basically these, when I'm stuck with a decision that I'm truly unsure about. These are the few people. This is my board that I will take that direction, that decision to, and I'll try and get their feedback and their inputs to take into consideration. And that in many ways is a true way for me to understand where. And sometimes it puts a mirror up at me and says, what are you really thinking about here? What are you worried about? Because you've done this before, or are you sure you really want to do this? Because I know you enough to know that if you really wanted to do it, you would have done it by now. So it's having that group of people that you can constantly lean on and go back to for that advice. My personal board of directors.
Nice. Thank you. I'm going to pass you on to Sham, but I just got one question about your board of directors, right?
Yes.
So what I'm hearing is, one area I'm hearing is people who are familiar with you, understand you, who have a certain set of experience, right? Now, in one of our shows a couple of months back, one gentleman told us that when he looks at networks, he looks at it from three areas: strategic groups, operational groups, and learning groups. So in that way, when you look at your board, right, what are some of the attributes that you look for to be part of your board?
Very good question. I think it's a few things. One is knowledge and expertise. So as I said, some ex-bosses that obviously have the functional knowledge and expertise. The second is life experience, not necessarily functional to what I do, but people that have dealt with adversity, people that have dealt with change, people that have moved and grown, and whom I think, because again, we tend to work in silos and different things, but human behavior at its core is quite common. A lot of things haven't changed. And so to lean on them for their experience. And the third group, I think, is a group that knows me, that understands me well enough to be honest with me, to know when I'm saying something and read between the lines and then challenge me on it or call me out on it. The things that I need someone else to say to me because I need to hear it before I can accept it.
Nice. Thank you for that. I have more questions, but I think I better keep quiet and pass it to Sham.
Sham's holding a bat somewhere to come look for you, Ashok. But before I ask my question, I'm going to say hello to Elijah Quack, because he popped up on LinkedIn to say hello. Hi, Elijah. Nice of you to make yourself visible and say hello. Thank you for joining us. Elijah is one of our very quiet viewers. He keeps to himself, and once in a blue moon, he puts a comment in after the show finishes. And is also one of our young leaders, potential young leaders. He is doing his diploma in law at the Temasek Poly. Right. So he's joined us. Okay, so I'm curious, right? The two questions I have are interconnected, but I want to start with this bravery, right? Trying things that are not really in your comfort zone, pushing those boundaries of those areas that you say, okay, these are the things I want to push it a little bit, right? And as much as there have been, or maybe less, maybe more, but you've got your wins, and you've also got the places where you stumbled, right? You fell, or you tripped, or you nicked your knee. How what are your strategies for bouncing back? How do you come out of it? Assuming that you kind of went into something, right? So what's your bounce back, your anti-fragility, your resilience, right? Where do you draw strength from? What is it? How do you think about it, perhaps, or how do you see it? What do you do? Yeah, share that with us, please.
Sure. It's funny, an interesting sort of story comes to mind from way back in middle school. We were putting up this play in school, and it was supposed to be this modern take on Romeo and Juliet. And as I mentioned, I'm an introvert, so this felt like one of those things I wish I could, so I did. And I told myself, I'm feeling that uncomfortable feeling in my stomach you get when you're anxious and excited all at the same time. So that's my karmic sign to go and do this. I need to go and try. So I signed myself up. And just for context, this is Romeo and Juliet. So first of all, auditioning is with a small group, but if I'm in the play, it's going to be with everybody. And there are so many cringe-worthy lines because it's mushy and it's a romantic play. And I'm one of those people that even to this day, if I'm sitting with my parents and watching TV and there's a scene where people are being intimate or kissing, I will need to cough or look away or change the subject. So you can imagine me picturing having to say these lines in front of my parents so this was way beyond my comfort zone, but I told myself that's exactly why I should do it. So I signed myself up and I went for the audition the next day, and I am happy to say that I bombed. I bombed so badly that I kid you not, that drama teacher probably wondered whether English was a language I spoke at all. You could not imagine a bigger fail. I stumbled the lines. I was embarrassed before I even said them. My voice was cracking for some reason, and it was the most terrible audition in the history of auditions that you can imagine. And when I think back to pushing out of my comfort zone, it's funny because those moments come to mind more than the moments where I've been successful. And that's because, and I think about myself when I teach my children about life, and these experiences as well, is that as parents, we teach our children very often what to do when they win, but we don't teach them what to do when they lose, because there will usually be fewer winners and there will be so many more people that didn't get that first prize or didn't win that competition. And it's bizarre that we prepare our children for the things that are easy. How to, if you win, you're going to feel good, you're going to celebrate it, you're going to want to push on. That's great. What do you do when you don't win? How do you prepare yourself for that 90% of your life? And these experiences where you get up, you brush yourself off, and you realize, hey, it was mortifying, but it didn't kill me. And it made me, it made me want to push more. It made me want to, I keep telling myself, as horrible as it is now, it's going to be a funny story at some point. And clearly this is that point, where it's a funny story that I think about how badly I bombed. And it's how I continue to keep moving. It's not allowing myself embarrassment or my judgment of myself to stop me from taking these risks.
Mm. And and so what is it that you tell yourself, right? Or do you do for yourself to reinforce that
I think
value, right?
it is, that there's at the very core of it, I tell myself in my day to day that my life is not defined by one thing.
Mm,
Just because something does not go well in one space does not mean I am a failure. There is a part that there is an obstacle that needs to be overcome, but then I have something else to lean on. I have my friends, I have my family, I have my work, and usually it's the ability to go back and to really go back and even check with that board and say,
mm,
okay, I tried this and it went fantastically terribly. So can you please tell me what I should do next, or why I shouldn't try this ever again,
mm,
or where I went wrong? So it's really about that sort of anti-fragility as you described it. It's not about just bouncing back, but coming back stronger and thinking and
mm,
reflecting on what went wrong. Right? You they say you don't win or you lose. You win or you learn. So
mm,
so I learn
mm,
and I evolve, and I'm someone now that has from. I may not be someone that was featured and starred in Romeo and Juliet, but I'm someone that has auditioned for it, and at least that's a bit of growth.
mm. Nice. And were there situations where, you know, you wanted to do it, but that nervous energy, that excitement in your system, right? It's kind of telling you, oh, this is something that I'm curious about. I want to try it, and you held yourself back, right? Was there an instance? And when you did that, when that happened, if that happened, what is it that you lost? What is it that you lost? And what, if any, did you gain from it?
I think yes, I have held myself back in the past.
Mm,
An incident that comes to mind is when I was offered with one of my companies to relocate to a different
mm,
location.
mm,
It was a great role and a good opportunity, but I held myself back for all the reasons that people do. My family is here. My husband's well settled in his work. My children were
mm,
young. Singapore is close to home, where my parents are in India. So it just made a lot of sense for me not to take that decision. I think about it. I think about what I lost and what I continue to lose every day that I don't make that move when opportunities arise. Uh,
mm,
and I think the biggest loss for me is not to be able to give to my kids the same richness of diversity and experience that I had growing up. I had all these experiences that I think shaped
mm,
so much of me, that I
mm,
would love for them to be able to have the same thing.
mm.
And again, from a career and a growth perspective, it was an entirely different opportunity. So there are many things that I lost. But again, it's going back to that decision, right? Of going back to my values and where I prioritize things, and where do you take that risk and where do you not?
Yeah, that's right. It's at the end of the day how it stacks up for you in terms of
Exactly.
what's most important and most next, right? Now, if we translate that what we've been talking about and kind of shift the conversation a little bit to your role as a leader of a team, right? The team at RightShip or the team when you were in the other organizations. What to you, and also with your board,
Mhm.
right? Some of your board members, you pick them because they've got certain qualities with them, certain qualities, certain experiences that to you speak to you, or these are the people that I want to have holding me at my back, right? So what are to you are the three most important leadership attributes that you think are important to you? That's on one hand, and the other hand, if your team were to look at you and say, okay, this is Purnima, she's my leader, I report to her, what are the three things that she's strongest at? So one is what you think it is, and what do you think your team would say
And
if that
hopefully the two overlap, right? Um,
yes.
it would be very, very, yeah, difficult if they didn't. But look, I think the three most important leadership attributes that I hold dear, and there's a whole lot of them, but if I had to stack, the first I'd start off with is empathy. I think the empathetic leader is one that is someone that understands that we bring our whole selves to work. Where we don't compartmentalize ourselves and bring just a part of me. When I go to work, I'm still many other things. And especially with this new hybrid way of working, and those lines have blurred so much more. And this is something that I feel like, again, in my own experience, it's not something necessarily that I wake up every morning and say, I'm going to be an empathetic leader because I think it's the right thing to do. But it's because when I had leaders that showed me empathy, it changed my whole mindset. It changed my approach to work. It changed my engagement. It changed my whole. I think the whole way that I showed up to work each day was different when I got that. When to give you an example, when I started this new role in my career, some moons ago, some lives ago, and I moved to this new company, and it was a fairly difficult to fill role at the time. They had spent a lot of time trying to find the right person, and they were, it was all about how excited they were that they found me, and it was a needle in a stack of needles situation, and I was so grateful and so glad. And 2 months into joining, I turned out pleasantly surprised to be pregnant with my first child. And I was genuinely nervous about how I would tell my boss this because, firstly, of course, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to disrupt everything. They've done all this stuff for me, and I'm going to come across as just completely ungrateful. How are they going to manage the work? And there was this part of me that felt like, is this a question of integrity? Because integrity is one of those values I hold dear. And this new company had a very generous insurance plan, which covered pregnancy and things like that. So was this a strategic move for me to make? And all these thoughts running through my head, and nervously I walk into the room and I ask my boss if, can I speak to you for a minute? I have something to share. And I walk in, and he asks me what, and very apologetically, I tell him that I've just found out that I'm expecting my first child. And there was not even a microsecond where he showed me any amount of frustration or anger. He literally just smiled and said, "Congratulations. What an exciting time in your life. And this is so great. And can I do anything to help you? And how are you feeling?" And I burst into tears because I was just so apologetic. I had the speech in my head for all the ways I will make this up to you. He laughed and laughed and said that, he literally came and hugged me and he said, "This is a great time in your life. This is not at all something to be apologetic for. This is something to be excited about. This is awesome. And everything else will fall into place." And that moment, that leadership, where I knew that me going away in a few months was going to put him in a difficult situation, it did not even come for a moment that I should feel at all guilty or anxious about what I was doing. It was very clear that to him, his care for me, an employee that had been in his team for all of 2 months, was far outweighed by any complications that could have arisen from this. And that sort of leadership, I think, is truly impactful. I hope my team feels that when they come to me and when they talk to me, that first and foremost, I see them as humans. I see them as people with joys and moments of sadness, and I see their entire selves. I don't just see them as operators doing a role.
Nice.
So
nice.
So yes.
Thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah, I was just going to ask a question before I hand over to Ashok. That question of, that it's a fine balance when you have any attribute that sometimes you spill over into overuse. The underuse, we speak about it very often. So if you take empathy, for example, care, right? The underuse of empathy or care by leaders is well documented. I mean, you see it in any post, right? Why did I leave this organization? Is usually the leader.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side that we don't talk about so much, right? And that's the overuse of an attribute. So any superpower, as we know, even with Superman, you overuse it and it doesn't become so super anymore, right? It has a flip side that we maybe not consider. just thinking out aloud, and I know this is not a question that we were preparing for, but I just wanted to get your take on it about what happens, or when have you seen, or when have you experienced, if any, but what happens actually, in an organization if you go over it, right? You're overusing empathy in your team. What do you think? I mean, if you were to put a hypothesis around it, what would that look like, sound like, feel like?
I I think empathy is definitely something I value, but overuse of it can create inequity. Each of us bring different challenges to work. Each of us bring different versions of ourselves, and if we start as an organization to respond very differently to each unique situation too much, you can end up very quickly in this down this rabbit hole of different experiences that different people have within the organization, because you've gone ahead and tried to show empathy in different ways and making things
Mm,
happen for them. And I think that gets quite tricky. The other part that I find becomes quite tricky as a leader is you become this moral judge, and you have to try and find boundaries and decide when is enough enough.
mm,
To give you an example, there are people that we offer flex working in our organization, which is brilliant. It's something that I've definitely used and a lot of others have. But then we time bound it, because beyond a certain point, what ends up happening if you work flexibly the entire year, I mean, there's obviously
mm,
legislative stuff and tax and all that you need to think about, but it's also, it can be disruptive for teams sometimes when you're in time zones, or when teams are designed in a way that working together makes a difference to the end
mm,
product.
mm,
That disruption should and can be lived with for a few months in the year, but as a permanent way of being, that could be very
mm.
disruptive, especially if an entire team opts to do that at any
Yep.
point in time, right? So I think there's definitely an optimal space,
Mm,
and then you can steer too much one way or another. To me, I think what helps me sleep at night, if I have to make a decision that doesn't ring true from an extreme empathy point of view, I wish I could have done more, for example, is
mm,
knowing that at the very least it's been just, it's been fair.
mm, mm.
It's a standard that has been fairly applied and reasonably thought through, as opposed to, well, in this situation I think it may be okay, but in that situation, who am I to judge?
Yep. Yep. It's a few things that come to mind when you said that, right? That pregnancy is not a lifelong thing. It's after 9-10 months, it's done, right? It's a short period of time. We make adjustments to it, about flex work, right? And the idea of fairness speaks to me. I think I think it's a useful way for us to think about balancing equality and equity,
Mhm.
in terms of what's the difference, or how do we think about it. And the other thing is that what you mentioned, I'm going to paraphrase it. In law, there's a term called the reasonable man test.
Mhm.
So sometimes, from a reasonable perspective, from a reasonable man
Correct.
on the street, on a Clapham omnibus, would that person think of it this way, or how would that person feel? And I think that if you have those guiding points, it's a good one to start, good way to think about whether I'm going too much or too little, or just right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Before I hand over to Ashok, I just want to tell our viewers out there, please put in your questions, or comments, or challenge. Look at Purnima, our guest this week. She's comfortable with consequences, and she's comfortable being pushed out of her
Famous
comfort
last
zone.
words.
Yes, yeah. And yeah, so put it out there, put it down there, into the chat, and we will get it attended to. Ashok, over to you.
Thank you. Purnima, thanks again for that. Okay, so I was so engrossed in your story. So I may have to start by apologizing first. I know you were saying number one, most important is empathy. I was so engrossed. Did I miss 2 and 3 yet?
No, we didn't get to 2 and 3 yet.
Okay, great, great. Yeah, tell us more. Tell us more. What are the 3 attributes, right, that you look for in a leadership? Tell us.
So yes, I think the first is empathy. The second is curiosity. And curiosity, not just in terms of finding the most innovative way to do something, but curiosity about people, curiosity about the world around us, curiosity in general, to be able to look at something in a new way almost every day, and to be continue to be curious. The third attribute I would say, and it's one that you spoke to, Sharmini, a bit, is anti-fragility. It's the idea that you come back from adversity stronger. Because adversity will always exist, and if you are not in situations where you're being challenged, then you're not in the right situations, because you're just stagnant, you're not growing, and as we were talking about in the beginning, you will soon be obsolete. So I think those are the three, I would say.
And from so Sham's second question was, do your teams also see the similar three?
They probably see too much curiosity because often I'm putting them in situations well beyond their comfort zones, and I know sometimes they appreciate me for it, and other times not so much. But yes, so they would see that. I think anti-fragility is a part of something we do every day. We're in a situation, especially the company that I'm working for, RightShip. We're a growing organization. We're experimenting with new ways of doing things and better ways of doing things. We've all come from, when I think about our HR team, we've all come from big organizations in the past where there is a right way, and these organizations have gone through their own journeys, and we're trying to skip a few steps and pick up what we've learned and build something better. So that sort of experimentation will come with failure. And unless we deal with that and very honestly go when something has gone wrong and apologize and say, look, we were trying something here, it obviously hasn't worked, so now we're going to backpedal a bit and come back to you with something better. And that anti-fragility, I think, not in just myself but in all of them, we see every day. It's how we operate, and empathy. I can tell you all sorts of details about all sorts of lives, but we take the time to get to know each other. I think we take the time in each of our conversations to make sure that we're aware of what's going on in each other's lives, and so that we're able to support each other when we need to.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is the three things is empathy, curiosity, and anti-fragility. Just on anti-fragility, what's the difference in your views, right? Now, how do you see anti-fragility versus perseverance?
So I think, perseverance is in my mind more the ability to push through, right? If there is something that is an obstacle to be met, and you just keep pushing through. I almost picture it as a big brick wall, and you just keep ramming your head until that wall breaks, right? But anti-fragility to me is sort of bouncing and jumping over that wall. It's about being able to go even higher than what you had started off before, because you bounced against that wall. It's to use each time that you bang your head against that wall as a lesson to come back at it stronger, as opposed to just keep hoping that if I keep doing this, eventually it'll break. So that in my mind is the difference.
What I realized about you, Purnima, is there's a central, I won't say theme, but there's something central about you, the way you care about human beings. And I'm just picking up some words that you've been using so far, because number one, you said even with your board of directors, right, you look for people who have experienced adversity.
Yes.
So you look for strengths in adversity. And you said when you look at people, right, you look at the whole person that they bring to work. Tell me a bit more, why is adversity an important thing for you, and how do you look at a whole person?
I think, look, adversity is a big part of me, and maybe it comes from my own story and my own legacy of, my father was born in pre-partition Pakistan, and they migrated over, and I've grown up hearing stories of all that they went through and all that they dealt with when they came to India, and everything that we had to leave behind and had to start again from scratch. And I think that, to me, through those stories, and stories are really how we share our culture and our values, right? Through those stories, it's ingrained in me a strong sense of keep moving. Just don't let things stop you. Keep moving and you'll be fine. It's how I approach making a decision as well. I will rarely wait for that point where things are absolutely perfect. I will wait for good enough and make a decision and know that if I need to backtrack, I can backtrack. But if I stand here for the next 3 hours debating the pros and cons and rights and wrongs of a decision, it's never going to be made. I liken it to sort of, I mean, if you think about, any cricketer or baseball player catching a ball, right? You can think of them standing there and calculating the trajectory and doing the math in their head to figure out what the optimal place is, but they're not going to do that, right? They're going to stand there, they're going to use their experience, they're going to use their muscle memory, they're going to use their line of sight, and they're going to catch that ball. So sometimes do they miss that ball? Yes. Would they have done it better had they done the math and formula? Sure. But life doesn't allow for that much. Very often decisions have a time sensitivity to them, and moving on and either catching or missing that ball is better than them being in the locker room with a pen and paper trying to do the math.
Right. I like about that decision making part. You don't have to wait for good enough to take act. Just wait for good enough. That's enough, right?
Yeah.
To take the action. Don't have to wait for perfection, right?
Exactly right. It's that age-old 80-20 rule.
Yep.
Yes, I love that. I really love that. Now, so adversity. That's why you lean on adversity, and you also mentioned about whole person, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that whole person.
It's really funny. I was, there's a story that I remember reading actually a while ago that stuck with me about this person that was, and this is around the time when we were thinking about hybrid working, and we were in the middle of COVID, and how do we make it work? And I'm in HR, and I'm trying to figure out how do we still make sure that there's a culture, that there's a central collaboration, and when new people are onboarded, they still feel like a part of the organization. And I was trying to, do some research and try and figure out what others are doing. And there was this one story about a gentleman who was in the army, and he said that every morning he would tell his helper, because he had to get somewhere, that look, call me up at 6 a.m. Right? Just call me up at 6 a.m. to wake me up because I have to go somewhere. And I don't know why alarm clocks didn't work. I'm sure there was a good reason, but I don't remember that part of the story, but that was the story. Call me up at 6 a.m. to wake me up. And every morning she would call him up at 6:05. And this would really, really, really irritate him. And he would, he would say, look, I've said 6 a.m. sharp, and this very army background, right? 6 o'clock means 6 o'clock. Why can you not wake me up at 6 o'clock? And I think every day he would shout at her, and every day she would apologize, and they would have this cycle again until the third day when he sort of, realized, or the third week rather, when he said, what is wrong? What's the problem? And he realized that this lady has to get into a line at a public phone booth to call him. And by the time the store opens and she gets to the front of the line, it's 6:05. And so she calls him every morning at 6:05. And that resonates, that there's a whole self. I could very easily see that this is an employee with an employment contract that is asked to do a certain job. They're not doing that job not because they don't want to, or they want to be defiant, or they don't care enough, but there's a whole self and a context to their lives and a context to everything else that changes things. And I'm not saying that you should now say, okay, fine, let's make it 6:05, but I'm saying that knowing that, giving that amount of thought to people and their whole selves makes you better leaders. It makes you more empathetic. It makes you more understanding, and it creates for a better work environment for everyone.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Thank you for that. Which then leads to the next question is, how then do you support your team to expand from their comfort zone? What are the conversations that you have? What are the actions that you take? And what is the sustainable support that you provide?
Yeah. Look, more often than not, I try to lead by example. I will volunteer us for things that seem unsurmountable at the front of it, and then hope we live to tell the tale at the other end. But equally, if we don't, it will be me that is explaining and apologizing. It's not, I will take accountability and ownership for this. But I try to speak, and I have, we one-on-ones with each of my team members, and we talk about everything from how they're working, what they'd like to do, what they, what excites them, and giving them that free run, but also what challenges them, and what would be one of those I wish I coulds, but we haven't done it yet, and then to give them the free rein and the comfort of them knowing that mistakes are truly acceptable as long as we're learning from them, and a sense of having their back, that should things go wrong, I have your back. But if things go well, equally, it's their time to shine. They should be on the pedestal. They should be applauded, and they should be celebrated because they've grown.
I'm going to interject with a question, Ken.
Yes, can.
Sure.
I must ask permission from my boss. So what if you had someone on your team and this person is risk averse, highly risk averse, right? And I'm not going to do anything that I know there's a potential, there is a smallest, even if there's a smallest chance of something going south, all right? I'm not going to do that. How do you deal with, I mean, it is one, that person's personality. Number two, you are in the right opposite, the other extreme of it, right? Almost. How do you wrap your brain around that?
I actually try to have someone like that in my team always, simply because it balances my style of leadership. I will, I tend to get excited about the next thing, and I want to know it, and I want to do it. And there is someone in my team that will stop and say, but wait a minute, have you thought about this? And they've gone into the details, and they've thought about all the ways in which it could go wrong and why we shouldn't potentially do it. And I think that to me is a great balancer, because everyone should have that. If you have people, if you have a team full of people that are absolutely just willing to take that next big leap without having someone that allows you to stop and pause and think, things can go awry very, very quickly. So I do have people like that in my team always, and I try to make sure that I have a lot of diversity of thought in my team that brings those different elements out. It's funny, we did this, I don't know if you're familiar with the tool Predictive Index, but we did this behavioral analysis based on PI of our team, and the entire team falls in such a wide sort of vast array of thought leadership and types of leaderships and everything else, and mine is right in the middle as an adapter. Mine is a very flexible, adaptable sort of thing. So we joke about how I'm like the sum of the parts. And I've picked everyone based on different elements of my personality. But I think that balance is very important. So I don't see them as someone that needs to be changed or overcome or worked around. I see that as a strength that can be leveraged to make sure that I have a sounding board as well. Equally, there have been times when someone has been so averse that my style of leadership simply doesn't suit them. And that's fair too. It's not every style of leadership, not every leader will form the right sort of synergy with somebody. And it's okay to be professionals and say, look, this doesn't necessarily work for me. Let's move on to something different.
Yeah. Mr.
Thank you. No, I like that. It's leading by example, right? The other one is about making sure you have their back, and it's also about having a diversity of thoughts. That means you are comfortable with that. Now,
I absolutely am. I think being challenged in a room full of people that I trust and I go to as a part of my team is far better than being challenged publicly once that ship has sailed. So I seek it. I look for it. When someone has challenged me and I have learned from it, I'm very comfortable calling that out. I have people on my team that sometimes come and say, that thing you said there, it didn't work. You may want to rephrase next time. And I've taken that advice, and I've reworded something, and I've gone to them separately and said, thank you for calling that out. I hope you noticed I did make that change. Because I want them to know that I value this. I value that learning, and I value that growth.
Wow. Wow. Thank you again. Now, in all of this, right? Because it appears to me you're very conscious about the diversity, the group of people that you have, whether it's from your board of directors or even within your teams, right? Right. And kind of like what I said, your PI index shows you are sitting in the center there, but you're very comfortable with that space,
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, in this whole journey, right, what have you learned about you, you yourself as a leader? What have you learned about yourself?
Sure. When you said that bit about diversity, this quote came to mind. That is, if two people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary.
Yep.
So it's that idea that diversity brings about all these different perspectives and ways of looking at things that just make the end result that much stronger. Um, what I think I've learned about myself is that I'm evolving. I'm never at a stage where I feel like I know everything I need to know and I'm done now. It's my idea and perspective of leadership and what good leaders look like has changed as I've grown through this journey as well. When I started off my career almost 18 years ago now, when we looked at the senior leadership, they almost felt like giants. There was a strong presence to them. They were someone that you admired, but from afar. And they had their own meeting rooms, and you knocked before you went into a room. And to me, that was great leadership, because look, there's so much credibility and trust and reverence shown to this leadership. But sort of as I evolved into a leader, I realized that's not who I am, and that's not the sort of leader that has really shaped myself and my life and my positive working experiences. So my idea of leadership switched over as well to, I don't want to be that leader that is seen as a giant. I want to be seen as someone that is very much part of the room, part of the solution, and working next to everyone side by side, growing together. So my ideas on what good leadership looks like, my thoughts about what I should be like and who I should emulate have changed. And I'm sure will continue to change as I grow through the next few phases in my career.
Wow. I love that, because sometimes Rasham and I also have been having a lot of discussions about is leadership overrated? Are we celebrating that big success, in the different ways? And you have shown that, again, confirms our show, right? We talked a lot about quiet leaders, right? You've shown that attribute itself. We have also talked about how our quiet leaders is in the show, they're introspective and they are comfortable with who they are. They think through about their identity, their values, and one of the values you talked about that is so important for you is about integrity. And I guess as you evolve, that will not change, right? And talking about change for the future, my last question for you before we end up is, you've spent a lot of time with the shifting mindsets and skills for your teams and all, right? What are the important skills that you see that are going to be fit for the future? For the leader and for the team.
Absolutely. And I think in many ways they will be quite similar for both. Empathy is one I come back to again and again. I think especially as we grow and our models of work and what we think about work changes, when it could be an email while I'm sitting at a birthday party versus having to clock in, clock out, that those lines are so blurred. That the leaders that more people will gravitate to are ones that can appreciate that understand that part of our lives. The second is really this anti-fragility or adaptability skill, because the world, I think, as I see it now, is far more unknown than it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago. The pace of change has accelerated beyond imagination. I mean, AI literally was a matter of weeks or months before it transformed almost the entire universe as we know it, right? So this ability to quickly adapt, to not be so wedded to your ideas and ways of doing things, but to be open to a paradigm shift. When you feel like you have enough new information to shift your paradigm, then shift it. Don't, choosing which ditch you're not going to die in, and saying that, that's okay. That's the second skill that I think will make people successful. And the third is really this whole digital bandwagon. I mean, understanding how it works, understanding how to work and operate in this world. We see it all the time right now. We have right now so many different generations in the workforce. And those gaps are very apparent, where some leaders that have the old style of leadership and the what works for them and what doesn't work for them versus some of the millennials and the newer iGens that have entered the workforce and their expectations. I think being able to sort of have that digital literacy and bridge that gap will be important, and a lot of it will need to be done by the more senior leaders, because they're the ones that are slowly going to be the ones that are those ways are going to become obsolete faster than the newer ones that are coming in.
Right. So what I'm hearing is empathy, be
Yep.
adaptable, and keep an eye on the digital space.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping an eye on everything that's happening around you, technology wise.
That's right. And thank you very much. That brings up to an hour since we've had this wonderful conversation, and I want to carry on. And you were worried that you wouldn't have much
I
to
was
say.
worried I wouldn't have an hour's worth to talk about.
Right.
Thank
There you
you.
go.
And to summarize what you've shared with all of us for the month of September in evolving leadership is you started out by talking about self-actualization, right? To be comfortable in getting out of your comfort zone, right? And you talked about being very clear about your values to anchor you. You talked about empathy will be the key driver. And in this unknown world, the adaptable mindset is extremely important. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing those key parts. Sham, do you have any other thoughts, questions before we say goodbye?
Yeah, just one last one, which I think will nicely wrap up the show to this week. Purnima, what's the book that you most resonate with? That's why I asked you whether you read that. That big book speaks to you because
Bad
it's
timing,
about
because
me.
my kids are in a phase right now where the answer would be Harry Potter, but it's the only thing that's playing in my mind. We were in the UK in the summer and we did all the Harry Potter walks and everything. So
Right.
if you ask me book, my mind says Harry Potter.
Okay. But I mean,
No.
it is a book. It is a book about maybe no choices, being pushed out of your
Yeah,
comfort
I
zones, right?
appreciate the stretch there, but the book that I am reading currently is called Atomic Habits. I think it's one that I'm late to the party on. A lot of people have already read and had good things to say about it. I finally picked it up, and it does. I think it tries to, going back to the theme of comfort zone. It tries to address pushing out of that comfort zone, not in one big leap, but chipping away at it by building newer, smaller habits. So that part of it really resonates with everything that I think about.
Very nice. Thank
Atomic
you.
Habits by James Clear.
Yes.
Yep. There you go. Okay, so thank you for joining us, Purnima. Thank you for saying yes once again. And like Ashok said, that 1 hour went off. So, and like we told you, it will go very, very fast because it's our job to pull out all the stories from you. And thank you for sharing them, being open with us and your stories. Thank you so much, Purnima. I'm going to put you in the
Thank you.
backstage while we wrap up.
Thank you,
Do you have
Purnima.
any last things to say to share with our viewers?
No, just thank you both for being such great hosts and for making an hour seem easy.
You're most welcome.
No worries.
All right, there we go.
Thank you very much. Wow, that's exciting, man.
Yep. I have not heard of bravery and curiosity and being pushed out of your comfort zone and experimenting spoken in the way that Purnima has done.
Absolutely.
Spoke about it, right? And that's the one of the joys that I have with this show is our ability to be in that space where we speak to leaders like Purnima, who know why they do what they do. They've thought
Exactly.
about it, right?
Yeah.
They unpacked it. They have made the dots connect, right? And it helps us because those themes are no longer something that's conceptual. Those themes have become a lot more hands-on, and it opens our mind and our eyes and our ears up to opportunities for us to experiment. That's my takeaway. Ashok, want to wrap it up?
No. I'm thank you all very much for logging in, right? For the month of September, which is about evolving leadership. And we just heard from Purnima about being comfortable with your choices, your consequences, and how to get out of the comfort zone, right? So next week we have another speaker, another leader, and log in again, same time, 6 p.m. Malaysia, Singapore time.
Right. Very good.
And
See
with
you
that,
next week.
thank you
Bye
all
bye.
very much for logging in for Leadership in Flow Asia.